And we said because growth comes through tension, and therefore choice, al pi Torah, but here al pi Torah has to be between two viable options. If it's a no-brainer, it's not called choice, al pi Torah. So therefore, Hashem, because you're naturally attracted to good options, and we said that the Mesilas Yesharim says that you and your neshama are like Barzell by Evan Sho'evet, that you naturally are attracted to good things. Therefore, there needs to be a balance, and the balance is that not good choices have to be packaged very attractively, because otherwise, it's like in the mashal with the two girls. The good choice is a natural beauty. The bad choice is very, very made up with a professional makeover, and you have to figure out which one is prettier, quote unquote, right? So that is the reason why bad choices have to be appealing. We then went into a whole series of what the makeup looks like, and we said the makeup looks like the way in my brain I convince myself that an option is good when it might not be so good for me. So we brought that idea of going to the party when maybe you know you don't belong there, but socially it could affect me, and I'll get depressed if everybody ostracizes me, and I'll be known as a snob, and I'll fail out of school, and I won't get into college. That's the way we dressed up, but your natural response was, I don't belong there. Okay? So, therefore, what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at all the different makeup options. And we spoke about a few of them. We spoke about the concept of, we spoke about the frames. Did I mention frames? Does anybody have, I remember we spoke about resistance to some cost. We said that if you've already invested a lot of time in something, when you've been in a relationship for a long time, it's hard to think about getting out of it. Or if you go to a show.
We start with instant gratification versus long-term results.
Okay, that was where and what was the one right before that? Social norms. So we did social norms, we did resistance to sunk cost, and we did...
We touched it. She said that's what we're going to start with.
Which one? The
instant gratification.
Okay, so instant gratification is a very, very big makeup on not good options. And we're trying to think about when you know that something is better for you, but you don't choose it, and you choose something else. Or you know something's better than you, but there's tension and you're still not sure. So often the instant gratification is the issue. And that goes everywhere from, I think I mentioned the world of dieting, where we all know that diets that tell you that you're going to lose like 30 pounds in 1 week, you probably will also lose your hair and your health and your bone mass and everything else. But like, who doesn't want to fit into that dress by next week? So even though in the back of your head you're saying this diet is probably a scam, it's probably not good for me, it might not work, but the idea of instant gratification is so compelling that the dieting industry has billions of dollars spent on instant diets, because we don't want to hear about Weight Watchers where it's a pound a week for the next year. People want instant results. The other place where people do those kind of decisions is when it comes to careers, where there might be a career that will make more money and will be better for me, but it's 3 to 4 years of schooling, 5 years of schooling, who knows what, and there's some kind of quick degree that I can get in 6 months, and I can be working already, and that sounds great because I want to get out of school. But we have to ask ourselves, any 6-month training, what is that really going to give me? Is that going to be as good as something that takes a while? I would like to move the instant gratification to another area. Sometimes you're in a situation where you're being pressured to do something that you know that it's better to stay away from it. It's better for you in the long run to stay away from it. But the instant pleasure that you'll get from succumbing to the temptation seems to draw you. So the classic example would be if you get back to the dieting again, right? So there's this great looking piece of chocolate cake on the table, and I know that it's bad for my diet, but the instant gratification, the pleasure of losing the weight is going to take a while. The pleasure of enjoying the cake is right now, in 2 seconds. So people will do what's not good for them because it's instant. And we all have temptations and things that we're pressured into where the little natural beauty inside us is saying, this is not good for you, don't do it. But then the makeup is that you can have pleasure in 3 seconds, that's great. And often that is the instant. If people said to you, this thing that you're about to succumb to will give you pleasure in 3 years, you'll be like, nah. But the fact that it will give you pleasure right now often makes you do something that you know long term is not good for you. So instant gratification is something that really, really, really is very difficult for people. And even something like kleptomania. So kleptomania is a psychological disorder of stealing, right? Often we think of people who steal, and we think of them as being people who, have issues with their morals. But kleptomania is an impulsive need to take away somebody's things. My father was a rabbi in a high school in America when I was a very little girl, and I remember the conversations about this. There were a lot of things missing in yeshiva. So they were looking at the guys who were the troublemakers. Okay, who's the robber? It ended up being, it was the biggest tzaddik in yeshiva, because he had a psychological disorder called kleptomania, which was not that he wanted to take away, it's not that he wanted to hurt people or wanted their things or didn't care about them. It's just the impulse, I have that, I see that I need it now, was so powerful. There's other ways to explain kleptomania, it's deeper than that, but yes.
You said before about the kira, it's not like a viable option. I mean, it
Yes.
has to be two viable options. So like for instance, kleptomania, is it like considered kira?
Okay, that's a very, very good question, because you can ask them about many psychological disorders. There's a big question, which maybe we'll get to at some point if you want, of the philosophical implications of deep psychological disorders. Somebody who's battling with clinical depression, is it a choice for them to be in a good mood? Somebody who has a real anxiety thing, is it a choice for them to be calm? So we have to deal with that on a philosophical level. That's the whole question. And the truth is that the kleptomaniac very often does not have, it depends, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, everything has its, it could be that if you're sitting in front of other people and you really wanted to, we wouldn't do it right then. So there's some level of bechira. But the more it's a clinical disorder, the less the bechira is in that area, and it's a very good point. It's because something we have to think about, why Hashem gives people certain limitations, and if they can't function well within those limitations. But I would like to bring that as a topic. It's excellent. But what I'm saying is that let's even say this person is mildly, it's not it's a subclinical disorder. It's not really clinical. So he sees the thing, and I want the thing. But that's my friend's thing. I care about my friend. I don't want my friend to suffer, but I need to have that thing. So you can see that the instant gratification. Now, if you said, if you take it now, you actually won't be able to have it for another 3 years, they probably wouldn't do it. But the idea that this could be gone in 5 seconds is sometimes very tempting, even when you're bringing another person. But I hear what you're saying, that would have to be somewhat subclinical in order for a person to have a choice. So, got it. Okay. So instant gratification is a big one with decision making, and I would venture to say that every day we're challenged with things with a long-term payoff. It says to me, don't do it, but the instant gratification is saying pleasure now. And that are those little bechiras that we make at different points over the day. Anything from lashon hara to what we eat, to standards that we have, that we lower our standards when we're under pressure. These are all things where the makeup is now, pleasure now. Okay, so that's instant gratification. We spoke about sunk cost, right? Just to remind you that the sunk cost is about the investment. I put so much into this, how am I going to get out of it? And that is also, I think that these two are the biggest ones for people. The need for instant gratification is often something that makes me make bad choices. Or, on the other hand, the fact that I've already invested so much time in something makes it hard for me to get out of it. I think with relationships, that's definitely true. Sometimes you've invested a lot of emotional energy into a relationship, and then even though the little voice inside is saying to me, this relationship is not healthy for you, the fact that I've known him for a million years, but I can't start new with somebody else, that stops us from getting out of things that are not good for us. So these two are very, very, very powerful. Okay. Frames. Did I talk about frames? I don't think we got to frames. Okay. Frames is another one of the makeups. And frames is interesting. Frames is the way you view a situation as you're entering it. And choice theory says that has a lot to do with the decisions you're going to make. I'll give you an example. If you are getting set up with a boy, and you're saying, oh my gosh, this is going to be a loser of a date. Oh, this is going to be such a bad date. Then your chances of, let's say, choosing to go out with him again, even if he's very, very good, are limited because you've already decided in advance that this is not going to be a good experience. So it affects your decision-making processes. The opposite is also true. If you walk into a situation and you say, this is going to be amazing. Let's say you go to a store, and you want to buy something, and you were told everything in that store you're going to love. You're much more likely to buy something in that store because you were told this is the best store, all your friends bought there, it's great stuff. It could be you're not gonna like things in the store, but you'll be much more likely to buy it because you framed it as being a store where you're gonna wanna buy things. So frames have a lot to do with the way people function. I'll give an example. In choice theory, they bring a not such a fortunate example, but they say gambling. People go to Las Vegas. If you go thinking, I am going to make $1 million tonight in this casino, whatever that would be, you're much more likely to kind of keep on impulsively, putting money in and whatever, even though you're losing, because you decided that you're gonna win. If a person says, I hear that a lot of people lose when they gamble, and I don't really want to have a foreclosure on my house and whatever, they're going to be much more cautious. So that's a choice theory, and that's an unfortunate example, but the way people act in a gambling situation has a lot to do with whether they framed themselves as saying, this could be really bad for me, or this could be really good for me. And I find that situations that we go into, like whether your year in Israel is going to be great for you, or whether you're going to love Israel, or whether that girl's going to be your best friend, or whether roommates are, so many things that we think about something beforehand, the way we frame it, has to do with the way we make a decision. And I don't think yes, that's.
Isn't that a result, like you can have a major disappointment because of that?
That you framed it, because you framed it. Yeah, in general, I don't think it's so good to frame things. In fact, there's a very, very interesting article. I've always felt this, but I never really had a proof for this. There's this whole sheet in positive psychology. Positive psychology is that if you believe that something's going to work, it's going to work, right? And that if you haven't fulfilled a certain dream, it's because you haven't wanted it enough. So positive psychology really, and there's also some Torah sources for this. The more the way you want to go is the way things will work for you. So positive psychology believes that you have to walk into a situation saying this is going to be amazing, and then it'll be amazing. Something always bothered me about it a little bit. You'll see when we're going to get to Bitachon, Chazon Ish, which is the shita that I used to Bitachon, doesn't go like that 100%. So I just read an article that came out about research on positive psychology. And the research proved exactly what you said. It says that people walk in very, very positive, but as soon as things start failing, they're disappointed, and paradoxically, they don't maximize their potential. It's all these examples are always in weight loss, but it said people who went into a dieting program with the vision that in a month they're going to be in that outfit, unless it was even realistic that they should be, because they had this vision of the way it has to be. There was a control group that was not told anything, meaning like they didn't have any picture in their head. One group is like, you imagine yourself achieving your goal. The other group was not told anything. The results found, this is such a paradox, but the results found that people who did not image themselves as succeeding did better. Now, there's a lot of research done on positive psychology, so I'm not trying to flip it the other way. But basically what the research shows, the new research shows that optimism with realism is the best combination. Because you walk in saying this could be amazing, but I'm also covering myself. We're going to get to this soon. It's part of the decision-making thing. But to say that, no, this is going to have to work, well, then what happens when it doesn't work? And we're going to learn, because we're going to get to be tough on the Chazon Ish had a much sounder system for people protecting themselves. If you walk into saying, no, it's going to go, it's going to be, what happens when it doesn't? You crash. You can crash spiritually. How come God didn't give me what I wanted? You can crash emotionally. This is what I dreamed for. My whole life I put into this. So we have to be careful with the positive. And in general, frames are not a good thing. Frames are not a good thing. I mean, you can have a good frame with some realism, but when you're framing, you're kind of, according to choice theory, you're pushing yourself. So I have to tell you a funny story. I don't know if I said this last week. Did I say this about the older single teacher who went on a date and told his students to come?
No.
What?
That sounds funny, no.
Okay. So I knew this person, an older single guy who had been dating for a long time. And this was maybe somewhat of a boundary issue, but he told his students, have a date tonight. He'd already been out with so many girls. He said, have a date tonight. It's going to be such a bomb. Come to this and this place and make faces at me to entertain me, because I can't stand another bad date. You know what? The students did it. They showed up and wherever he was, in kind of hotel, whatever, and they brought black glasses and newspapers, and they sat in all the seats around and kept on putting it down, putting it up, whatever. And you know what? That was the girl who he ended up marrying. And he was so embarrassed that he had told them that she was gonna be a bomb. This is just probably gonna be some kind of blah, 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 whatever he said, you know? It ends up that he really liked her. But imagine how hard that must have been to see the good in her after he framed this as being a bomb, told all his students that it was gonna be a bomb, and then he shows up and she's a great girl. That's why we don't want to frame things. And thank God he had the vision to realize that despite the fact that he told everybody that this was going to be awful, it was really great. So we have to be careful with how we frame things. But we're going to get to that a little bit about how that works in decision making. Okay, so we did frames, we did instant gratification, we did resistance to sunk cost. Was there another one that we had done? Social norms, we did. Okay, number 5 is chronic over and under confidence. And then we're going to move on to a whole different theory in choice. But chronic over and under confidence is that sometimes when people don't trust their own decision-making abilities, they could be in a good decision, they could be in a good situation where they can say, but I'm such a baby, I don't know anything, I don't know anything about life. How? If you are underconfident, the natural voice might be saying to you, wow, this is a great person for you, or this is a great situation for you, or this is a good friend to make. But then the other voice inside you is saying, what do you know? You don't know anything. You're so young. Well, you can't trust yourself. And therefore you might not choose an option which is good for you because you're prone to think that you don't know what you're doing. There's something else called chronic overconfidence. And chronic overconfidence is the people who make bad decisions because they're too sure of themselves. And they walk into something deciding, you know, it's almost a little bit like the frames, but their overconfidence does not allow them to properly understand the situation in front of them. So here they are, and there's like, they're reading certain signs, but they're so sure of themselves that they're not listening, they're not thinking about it carefully. Okay. I want to go into a completely different aspect of decision making, because everything that we're saying now, basically our purpose is to take the makeup off of the two choices and to look at them. And then to see, after you see what's affecting you, you say to yourself, okay, now what? And I don't know if I brought the mashal last week, but like if you take a hose and you hose down both girls, like Ein Mine Torah, right? You take the hose and then one of them is dripping, and the natural beauty looks the same, but the one with the professional makeover is now dripping, and you're like, oh, okay, now I can see. Now I can see which one is prettier. So when we try to understand what's affecting us, that's called making a decision al pi Torah. And the Gemara says about the Yetzer Hara, Baratu Yetzer Hara, Baratu Torah Tavlin. I gave you a Yetzer Hara, but I gave you Torah, which is an antidote to the Yetzer Hara. And Rashi says something very interesting. Rashi says there, Im pagabecha min huval zeh, mashchehu lebeit hamikdash. If that despicable character in your Yetzer Hara attacks you, schlep him into the Beit Medrash. Now, what does that mean to schlep him into the Beit Medrash? It doesn't mean literally, but figuratively means try to make your decision al pi Torah. Say, hold on 1 second, I want to ask my rabbi about that, or I want to think about that before I make that decision. Because many decisions that we make impulsively when the Yetzer Hara attacks us, if we just would put it in a Torah context, we might decide to do it differently. And that's what Rashi is telling you. If that despicable character attacks you, fight him on your turf. Say, hold on, I want to think about this. And you bring him into your base medrash, and you make a decision in that context. Okay. I want to go into something completely different, which is to help people who don't make good decisions. Now, I want to tell you that the people who make good decisions, the people who are not good at making decisions, this is not a judgment on anybody's character. It really has a lot to do with the way your brain is wired. In fact, research shows that if your parents are not good decision makers, it's likely that you're not going to be a good decision maker because it has a lot to do with the neurology of the way you're wired. But I always bring the example. You know, you have some girl who comes back from Israel, she goes to a store, she buys an outfit in 1 second. Did I bring this mashal last week? Imagine 2 girls come back from Israel, I need new clothing. One girl goes to a store, she tries on an outfit, she likes the way it looks, she buys it, that's it, she's finished. Now she has other things to do, she has free time. Another girl goes to the store, spends the entire day in the mall, trying on outfits, gets to the end of the day, she still can't decide, tomorrow's going to be another day of shopping, another day trying on, not deciding. Finally, when the store is closing and her mother's already like, you know, going crazy, she picks 2, and she leaves the tags on, and she takes them home, and she's kind of deciding between the 2 of them because she's still not sure. And then finally, when she has to decide if she wears one, she says, oh, I think the other one would have been nicer. Now, this is the way we're wired. It's not a better person or not worse person. There's certain people who have an easy time with decisions, and certain people have a hard time. In fact, there was a New York Times article that said that when you walk into a store that has like 50 different choices of coffee, you're more likely to walk out without buying any of them. And when you go to a makolet that has, let's say, 2 choices, you're more likely to buy. People get overwhelmed by too many choices. So what I want to do with you today is how do we make better decisions? Let's say you're not so good at decision making. How can you make better decisions? Now I want to tell you something about the difference between people who make good decisions and people who have a hard time. And I'm going to tell you like this. Imagine a straight line and imagine a circle. People who make good decisions, their brain works in a linear way, like a straight line. Meaning, okay, I don't know what to do. Maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that. Okay, whatever. Okay, decision, bye. The same information is only processed once. They move from A to B to C, there, decision, goodbye. What happens to the person who has a hard time making decisions? Their brain works like a loop. Should I do this? Should I do that? I don't know. This might be good for me, that might be good for me. Then it goes round again. Should I do this? Should I do that? I don't know. Maybe this might be good for me, that might be good for me. Meaning, instead of it being a straight line with a beginning and an end, it's a circle. And it keeps on repeating. I have a friend who's a psychologist in New York, who deals with very bright people. And she says they'll come into the office and they'll say to her, you know, I'm agonizing over this decision, whether it's, you know, somebody they're dating, or some kind of career thing, or some kind of summer thing. And she'll say to them, how much time have you spent thinking about this? And they'll say, 50 hours. I can't stop thinking about it. I think about it all the time. And then she asks a very interesting question. She says, how much of that information is new? Meaning, is it 50 hours of new content? When they think about it, they say probably around 10 minutes worth is the actual thoughts. And then the next 4 hours and 50 minutes, no, 49 hours and 50 minutes is repeating the same information in your brain again and again. You know what it's like? It's like a Ferris wheel in an amusement park. If you know somebody who's on the ride and they get to the top and you wave at them, and then they go down and they come around again and you wave at them again, and then they go down and come around and you wave at them again, that's what our thoughts are for people who have hard decisions. The same thoughts keeps coming back to wave at them, and that's what's called rumination. Rumination means excessive thinking too much. But it's not that it's all new, it's repetitive thoughts. I want to tell you, for anybody who suffers from this, rumination with a U. Anybody who has this is what people coin the Harvard syndrome. Meaning it's often very bright people because their brains are very active. And it's nice when your brain is active when you're thinking about a great Maharala you just learned in class. But when you're excessively thinking about something which really other people have already been able to move on and you can't, very often it's very bright people. That doesn't mean that it's dumb people who make quick decisions. That's not what I'm trying to say. But it often goes together with an active brain. Yes?
Can you be a ruminist?
Ruminator.
A ruminator in not across the board, not with every decision.
Yeah. People have their sensitive topics
They can't
that
get
drive
out.
them crazy. It's so interesting though that once you have a ruminatory brain, it's interesting how sometimes it surprises you. I'll give you an example. I had this guy who I was dealing with dating, fantastic guy. And he was like a very, very, very strong guy. One of these guys who came to Israel and really got turned on to learning and is like, was brilliant and knew a lot. And he just had a lot of trouble with dating. It was really, 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 really hard for him to figure out which girl to marry. But what was interesting was that once he was in that ruminatory place, he started having all kinds of questions about emunah that he had never had before. Meaning his brain started getting very, very, very excessive, and then he started challenging himself with things that were not really bothering him, and it was scary to him. It's like, you know, I believe in emunah, like why do I keep challenging myself? And it ends up that when he dealt with a therapist who really helped him, she made him understand that the loop in his brain was taking over areas that it shouldn't have taken over even. But so some people will always stay in the dating. Everything else they're decisive about. They just can't decide who to marry or what career or something else. But for some people, it will be in a few different areas. Yeah, but for sure, it doesn't mean that everything is stopped. Although there are some people who will tell you that they have a hard time. Did I mention the lady with the baby carriage last week?
No.
I had a student who was probably one of the brightest students I ever had. She was an Ivy League graduate, that type. And I met her after she had a baby. And the baby was already maybe 2 months old. And she was still holding the baby in her hand because every time she went shopping to go buy a baby carriage, she couldn't buy one. Because it was like, here the wheels are bigger, but this one's heavier, but this one I like the color, but this one's more comfortable for the baby. And she was so jealous. She was like looking down the street, and everybody who has a baby who's 2 months old has already bought a carriage. She could not buy the carriage because there were too many thoughts about how to do this, and she couldn't get to the decision. So for some people, it's going to be only in one area, and for some people, it's going to be in a few different areas. And sometimes Hashem makes certain decisions easier for us. Like sometimes, I've had students who've been very ruminatory who say to me, Mrs. Schoonmaker, what's going to be when I have to make a marriage decision? Like, I'll never be able to decide. And then they were lucky that Hashem gave them a guide where they were so sure about him in every way that it was an easy decision. So it doesn't mean once a ruminator, always a ruminator, but it could be, and we have to be prepared. And for some girls who call me back and they say to me, I'm dating and I don't know what to do, I said, let's just remember something. We could have written this script about you 5 years ago, because you always had a hard time with decisions. We just have to understand that this one also is difficult for you. Meaning, because sometimes I start thinking maybe there's something wrong with the guy if I can't decide. But I say to them, if we could have written the script a long time ago that that's the way your brain works, then it could be that it will be difficult for you here too. Okay, so I want to solve, as much as we can, give you a system that could work for making better decisions. So what we want to do with somebody who has like this loop kind of thinking, to help them become more linear. The circular is the ruminatory person, and the linear is the, and by the way, I don't know if I said this last week, but rumination is also true about things that we're scared of. For a person who's more linear, you think, ISIS, that's scary, and you go on to do your day. And for some people who are more ruminatory, it's like, oh my gosh, cutting people's heads off, oh my gosh, and they think about the same thought again and again and again and again. Now, it's not that their friend has not thought about it, but their friend went in, kind of got stored in the brain somewhere, and then went out, moving on. And for the person who's ruminatory, there's like a loop. The same fear, the same picture comes into my head again and again.
Can't it just be things you really care about? So you're not willing to not even let go, but to stop thinking.
Yes, but we're going to learn that even when you care about something, you could spend time thinking about it, but when you start repeating the same ideas again and again, you're getting your brain tired without really helping yourself. You see what I'm saying? If you come up with a new idea about it, something new to evaluate, and it's a richer decision, great. But the idea is when you tire your brain with the same thoughts, that's, even when we ruminate about something, why did I say that? 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 After the second time, you're not helping yourself anymore, even though you care. You see what I'm saying? And that's the problem. Rumination in general, what it does is it tires a person out, and ironically, it pulls them away from a good decision. Because by the time they finish ruminating, they're so tired, they don't even know what to do anymore. I'll give you an example. A girl will go out on a date for 2-3 hours, but then she'll analyze it for 50 hours with her friends. And then she doesn't even know if she likes the guy anymore because she's sick of talking about it already. So she doesn't know, am I sick of him? Am I sick of talking about it? What am I sick of? So ironically, ruminating really often makes us make worse decisions.
So it's more blurry than you think of it. You think every time you think about it, you're getting more clear, and it's but really it's more blurry.
That's why I like what my friend, the therapist, which is makes people evaluate how much information is new. Everybody's shocked because when they come in, they say, "Well, I thought about this for 50 hours." Well, that's impressive. But if only 10 minutes of it is new information, then it's not really didn't really help you. And that's exactly what we want to get to today. So this is book that if anybody wants to read more about it, I'm going to give you the basic theory. There's a book by someone called Edward de Bono, and it's called The 6 Thinking Hats. And basically, his theory in the book, thinking hats. And we're going to turn. It's not a Jewish book, so I'm actually going to add 3 hats for Jews. So it's going to be like nine thinking hats for us. Basically, what he does is something very good. He says if you want to make a good decision, you need to think linear, meaning you need to move from A to B to Z. You need to know that you made a decision. Now, he doesn't talk about this, but there's something called the rumination diet. rumination diet means that if you think too much, you want to limit your thinking time. Just the same way as if you eat too much, you would put yourself on a calorie diet. If you think too much, you put yourself on a rumination diet. What does the rumination diet mean? It means I'm only going to let myself to think about this for the next, I look at my watch, you have till 9:30 to finish thinking about this issue. At 9:30, you're moving on, you're getting together with friends, you're doing other things, meaning you literally limit your intake. Now, I've not gotten to Devorah yet, I'm going to get to them soon, but I want to explain about the value of the rumination diet. Why is it so good to put yourself on the rumination diet? Because, and this is very interesting, the neurological theory has it that every time an idea presses you to think about something that you don't want to think about, it's like a little war. Imagine a war in your head. You're thinking, I have things to do, I want to go study, I want to spend time with friends, and this idea is saying to them, no, worry about me now, think about me now, think about me now. There's a battling match going on in your brain. And the question is your thoughts going to control you, or are you going to control your thoughts? That's the battle in your brain. Now, neuroscience says that every time you manage to win the battle, even only for a few minutes, you are weakening your opponent. The thought doesn't have so much control over you next time. Now you might say, but I went back to that thought. So I went to this from Rabbi Dr. Twersky, the addiction expert. He said if somebody was smoking and they abstained for a day and then they go back to it, you think, oh, so what? What was the word? They only abstained for a day. He says that the impulse of the smoking over them was weakened over that day. Because every time that impulse said, smoke, 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 and they said, no, 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 they were winning a battle that you don't control me, I control you. And the same thing goes for thoughts. Because thoughts, and this is interesting, girls, thoughts is kind of like an addiction. We get addicted to our thoughts sometimes. We have to worry about this. We have to think about this. We have to obsess about this. Anything which controls me, I want to gain control over it. Now this is an important next point. We think of distraction as a cop-out. Yeah, I didn't smoke because I was busy with my friends, so that's why I didn't smoke. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why you didn't do the thing that you wanted to do. The fact that it wanted you to do it and you said no is already a victory. And therefore distraction for any kind of addiction, it works. I don't have to sit there on my bed and say, no, I'm not going to succumb to the impulse. I can get busy with friends. But the idea is that something was pushing me, and I said no. And even though I said no through a distraction, I still won the battle in my brain. And that's true about thoughts also. Because anybody who knows the pink elephants theory knows that if you sit on your bed and you say, don't think about pink elephants, the first thing you're going to think about is pink elephants. So when we sit there and we say, I'm not going to worry about this now, or I'm not going to think about this now, of course you're going to think about it. You often have to do something to distract yourself. I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to pick up a phone and call a friend. I'm going to go do exercise. I'm going to go study. Or I'm going to go, I don't know, whatever it is. The point is distraction is not a cop-out. And that's very important for us to remember. Why do we think distraction is a cop-out? Because we confuse it with repression. Repression is the problem doesn't exist. Distraction is the problem exists, and I will decide when to think about it. That's very different than repression. So we can tend to get the two of them confused. Distraction means I know that this is important, I know I have to think about this, but I'm going to give myself 10 minutes to think about it, or I'm speaking to somebody tonight at 8:30. That's very different than saying it doesn't exist. So repression is problematic because it's very interesting. But there's a book now, I want to quote you from this. There's a book by somebody called Daniel Goleman. I think I maybe have quoted him here before. He's the writer he wrote the book called Emotional Intelligence, and he wrote a book called Social Intelligence. Now he just came out with a third book called Focus. And Focus is about distraction. It's about what distracts people, how people get focused. You can imagine all different types of things. So he has something very interesting that he says here. He says that when you're distracted by an idea, when there's something that's bothering you, there's a reason why it's bothering you. And he says here, I just want to quote you, the biggest challenge comes from the emotional turmoil of our lives. like a recent vlog in a close relationship, but keeps intruding your thoughts. But now this is the important point. Such thoughts barge in for a good reason, to get us to think through what to do about what's upsetting us. That means that when you're ruminating about something, often it's something that's important to you, as Malcolm said. So to say, why am I thinking about this? There's a reason why it's bothering you. Don't ignore it, but you need to control it. Now this is his advice. He says the dividing line between fruitless rumination and productive reflection lies in whether or not we come up with some tentative solution. I want to analyze this for a second. He says like this. He says a thought is bothering you. What are you doing for Shabbos? 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 Right? He says there's a reason why that thought is in your head, because you need to make Shabbos plans. Right? He says what's the difference? Fruitless rumination means for 50 times in my, I'm not going to enjoy myself because I'm keep thinking, what am I doing for Shabbos? What am I doing for Shabbos? What am I doing for Shabbos? He says productive reflection means, maybe I should make a phone call. So he says that when something is bothering you, you should do something about it. But rumination means I'm not doing anything except for just obsessing, I'm not doing anything. Productive reflection, let's say you had a fight with somebody, why did I say that, but 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 why did I say that? When you repeat 50 times in your head that thing that you said that you felt was so stupid to say, that's called fruitless rumination. It's not bringing me anywhere and I'm just obsessing. What's the opposite of fruitless rumination? Productive reflection. Something good has to come out of the fact that this thought is in my head. You know what? I am going to call her and apologize. Or I'm going to at least start writing an email. Or, and he says here, you're going to come up with a tentative solution or insights. Sometimes I don't have a solution to the problem. You don't have a solution, you're not going to solve the problem of ISIS in the world. But, the certain problems we just cannot solve. Insights. Insight is, these things tend to bother me more when I don't get enough sleep. Or I get into fights with my friends when I'm around that person, because that person is the person who brings out that side of me. Meaning sometimes you don't have a solution, but you have an insight. And I have to tell you something, that Torah, from our perspective, you always have a solution. If ISIS is bothering you, sit down and say a prayer to Helen, and then move on. Because davening is always a solution. But sometimes we obsess about something 50 times without doing something. And the doing something could just be davening for a minute. I'm going to say a prayer to Helen for the refuah of that person, or for this problem, or for Klal Yisrael, or for whatever it is. But he says that once you come up with a tentative solution or an insight, then you can let the distressing thoughts go. You say to yourself, did something, said the prayer to Helen, now moving on. I'm distracting myself. On the other hand, if you just keep obsessing over the same loop of worry, and this is the difference, because ruminating people don't do anything, they just obsess. And if you want to get the ruminatory thoughts out, sometimes you have to think about something, you have to come to a conclusion. Now I know that I need to get more sleep, I have to write her a letter, I have to make a phone call, I have to say a prayer to Helen, but then I move on. And this is where distraction comes in. So distraction means that any time the thought said, think about me, and I said no, even because I was very busy with friends, that was a half hour that thought wanted to bother me and it didn't, I won. And I'm loosening the neurological control of obsessive thoughts over me. The next round, the thought is already a little weaker because it lost. So distraction works, and it's important. Okay, oh boy, I didn't even get to my list. Okay, I am going to introduce this list, and we're going to go into it next week. So the first point is, girls, that when you're obsessing about something, a ruminatory diet is a good idea. Say to yourself, you have 10 more minutes to think about this, and then you have to move on. It's great. Number 2, tentative solution or insight. Thank you for bothering me, thought, because now I understand that when I don't get enough sleep, I'm more likely to be obnoxious to my friend. Or now I realize that I should really stay paranoid to him that the world situation should be safer. Meaning I got to something from it, and now I'm moving on. And number 3 is distraction. Meaning, time to go, time's up, now I get moving. So I'm not repressing, the thought might be important, but I'm not letting it control me. Now, I want to get to decision making. Because if the thought that's bothering you is about a decision, And it's good that it's bothering you, because you do have to make this decision. So then, you have to say to yourself, okay, I need to go through a process. Now here, the rudimentary diet is gonna be a little bit different. Let's say you haven't made summer plans. You might say to yourself, by January 29th at 8 o'clock at night, I will have a decision about my career. It's like almost like a rudimentary diet, but in a wider, you give yourself a nice amount of time to think about it. And by the way, some people say by 8 o'clock tonight, I'll decide my career. You can decide it. Again, consider the fact that the amount of time that's put into the thoughts is not so major. So the first idea is you make yourself a deadline. I will have decided by this amount of time.
This is number 4.
This is really decision making, because the distraction rumination could be even just about worrying. You know, ISIS, you have nothing to decide about with problems, certain problems in the world. But this is where the thought that's bothering you is a decision that you have to make. So what do I do? So the first thing is I say to myself, I want to know by a certain time. Now I will introduce this list and we're going to deal with it next week. I'm going to give you the list of the hats. And the theory of the hats is like this. The theory of the hats is that the way I can make a good decision is by I keep on taking off one color hat and put on another, and then I take off that one and put on the next. And when I get through all the hats, time to make a decision. Okay? Number 1 in the hats is the white hat, which represents, all right, this word for you. Can people see from here? Yeah. Okay, this is heuristics. It's a fancy word for collecting information. So white is going to be the thought hat, the cognitive hat, heuristics. Heuristics means, what information do I need in order to make this decision? Do you know that some people tell me, you know, I've agonized, I can't stop thinking about a career. I can't stop thinking. For 50 hours I've been thinking, should I go into this or this? And I say to them, oh, well, which one makes more money? And you know what they say to me? I don't really know. Or which one will work better in Israel? I don't really know. Meaning some people obsess about ideas and they don't even have all the information that they need. So the first hat that I put on when I have to make a decision is it's almost like you're walking around with a clipboard collecting information. What do I need to know in order to make this decision? And that's heuristics. And you'd be surprised how many people obsess about decisions and they still are lacking information. You think if somebody says to you, I've been thinking for 50 hours, then they have a lot of information. Sometimes they don't. And sometimes later when they find out one piece of information like this wouldn't work for me, or I can't go to that program because whatever, like, oh, what a shame that I wasted 50 hours. So the first step is collecting information. And by the way, when it comes to relationships with boys, do you know everything about this person? Do you really? Have you spoken to his mashgiach? Do you know what he's up to? Do you know what his abilities are? Do you know if he gets along with people? Do you know if he's talented? Do you know if he's solid? Do you know if he's stable? That's heuristics. People agonize about relationships when there's some information that they haven't collected. So the first hat is going to be the white hat. And you shut down your emotion. One of the hats is going to be the emotional hat. We'll talk about that soon. But this is just like you take out your piece of paper and you say to yourself, what information do I need to know in order to make this decision? And that could be anything from your Shabbos plans, to your summer plans, to a relationship issue. What information is necessary for me? And that's the white hat. Okay, I am already keeping you over, so the other hats we're going to do next week. Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a good week.